Welcome everybody to another episode of Moving Markets. I'm Jeffry Dunyon. I'm glad to have you here today. Got my country hat on today. I'm not much of a country boy. I'm more of a city boy. But I was out mowing the lawn yesterday afternoon, and I put this hat on sometimes when I'm mowing the lawn. And since I'm trying this entire month to pay tribute to soldiers, I thought the Stars and Stripes were somewhat appropriate. Doing something a little bit different today. I'm actually on live, and the market is about to open in just a couple minutes. Usually we're an hour or two into the market open when we go on and do this presentation. But we're going to watch it open this morning. Futures are pointing up a little bit, not anything crazy. Two good days in a row, Tuesday and Wednesday, both strong finishes in the market. We had Tuesday, Dow was up 300 plus points during the day. Spent a good portion of the day up over 300 points. I think it got close to 400 points up a couple times, but then it tailed off at the end and still had about a 211, 212 points today to the upside. Yesterday started out rough. We started out down 140, 150 points, and then gradually started making the climb. And then by the end of by the middle of the day yesterday, Dow was up nearly 200 points. And then it tapered off a little bit, and at the close, it ended up being only up 115 points. Now, I say only 115 points. Last week, we were saying, isn't it great that we're only down 473 points? 115 yesterday, 200 and some change the day before. We've already got back about half of what the markets gave up on Monday. Last week, for all its turmoil, for all its back and forth, was really kind of a flat day or a flat week, down a little bit for sure. And we're definitely well off of our highs, and there's some concern. I mean, there's concern on a number of fronts. There is concern with the China trade talks. There's concern with things heating up with Iran and some of the rhetoric going on over in Iran. There is concern about a slowing economy in the U.S., a slowing global economy. Politics is never 100% out of the spotlight. You've got these different things going on, and it's a very uncertain market right now. There's no easier way to say it. There's no more direct way to say it. There's no more simple way to say it. You've got a very uncertain market right now. You've got competing the people who are maybe being a little overly cautious, maybe being a little bit overly jumpy, people who are maybe showing a little more concern than they should. But then you've got the people that are the eternal optimists, the people that think that every little tiny piece of good news is a reason to go all in. And you could make a strong case for either one. There's nothing new has broke overnight in terms of political news. There's no new geopolitical news going on. There was a statement came out. And by the way, the markets are open right now. Right out of the gate, the Dow is up almost 100 points. NASDAQ up about 5, S&P up 7. NASDAQ futures were pointing down a little bit. There was an expectation that maybe NASDAQ was going to fall just a tiny bit. And the Dow is up 108, 109 points now, in spite of the fact that Apple, a good-sized Dow component and biggest company in the world in terms of market cap, or at least it's awfully close. There's this constant battle between Apple, Amazon, and Microsoft as to who the trillion-dollar company is, but they're all huge companies. And in spite of Apple being down, you've got the Dow is up almost 120 points. There was a comment that came out just ahead of the open, and I think this has as much to do with the markets being up as anything right now. Sarah Sanders, the press secretary for the president or for the White House, put out a statement saying that there is a meeting scheduled. There is a meeting being scheduled between President Xi of China and President Trump for the G8 summit meeting that I think comes up at the end of June. It's interesting. we've kind of known and kind of suspected that there would be a meeting between the two. We've kind of known for a little while that that meeting wouldn't take place. At least it was likely it wouldn't take place until the is it the G8 or the G20 summit? I don't remember. Anyway, a handful of world powers get together and talk about a variety of issues and a range of issues. Everyone's so scared of China that no one will really stand up to them. But the U.S. is certainly trying and certainly giving it some effort. Trump did tweet out last night, I think, that he was declaring a national emergency and was going to sign an executive order based on national emergency, and essentially what he was claiming he's going to do is not allow American companies or prevent American companies from having business dealings with foreign enemies. The strong implication behind that is that China is a foreign enemy. Now, we've played nice with China for a long time. We've tried to get along, we go along to get along with China, and we've been kind of playing their game, so to speak, or at least turning the other way as they play their game. There are some people, I may count myself amongst these, that believes that China is our enemy, that there is nothing that China does that they do for anything other than their own self-advancement, and that they see us as the enemy. Now, you could say that what the United States does, they do for their own self-advancement, but if that were the case, if that were true, we wouldn't be giving billions and billions and billions of dollars to multiple different countries every year, just in humanitarian aid, just to try and help, prop up countries that are poor and that are dealing with some economic difficulties that we don't have here. If we just cared about ourselves and nothing else, we wouldn't be doing that on the scale that we're doing it, and we're doing it on a massive, huge scale. So when people want to say that we're a selfish company, or country, when people want to say that the United States is, only self-interested, they're just lying. I mean, they're just flat out lying, or they're just really stupid and they really are unwilling to open their eyes and look around and see what's going on. So anyway, that little bit of tit for tat is going to continue. I heard one news anchor say this morning that he feels like this is a new Cold War that we're having with China. For those of you that lived during the Cold War, probably most of my audience, myself included, no shots were fired, but we were no doubt at war with the Soviet Union for a lot of years. It was called a Cold War simply because there were no shots fired. But we were at war nonetheless. There was spying, there was espionage going on. I'm sure there were attempts by both countries involved to undermine the other country in some way or another. And what's going on with China right now could be considered a Cold War. Hopefully it won't get to the point where shots get fired. So that's the backdrop of what's going on today. You had this morning before the market opened, Walmart and Cisco both reported. Those are two of the bigger Dow components that reported their corporate earnings. Both had phenomenal numbers. I have not read all the details of it, but Walmart, they had record-breaking numbers. I think it was their biggest growth they've had quarter over quarter for a single year, something like that. I'll have to, when I'm done here, I'll have to jump in and read the actual headline and see what the actual news was. I'm just going off a headline I saw. But they're up nicely. They're definitely helping to propel the Dow up, and in spite of Apple still getting beat up a little bit. Apple's going to continue to beat up until one of two things happens. Apple's either going to have to figure out a way to sort of separate itself by association with China. They're going to have to figure out a way to make the world believe that they can be a healthy, profitable company and a good investment, regardless of what goes on in China. That's a tall order. That's a tough one to convince people of. People that don't like Apple are straight up Apple haters. Apple and Donald Trump have a lot in common. You either love them or hate them. And fortunately for Apple, there are a lot of people that love them, and there are a lot of people that use their products. I'm one of them. I use an iPhone. I use a Mac computer. I have an iPad. I have an Apple Watch. I'm an Apple geek. I love the Apple products. I love the Apple stuff. I make jokes with some of my friends, some of my in-laws, about not stepping into the 21st century and using iPhones like the rest of the smart people in the world. But Apple's got a tough row to hoe if they're going to convince people that they're not going to be negatively impacted by China. And maybe they just continue to take the high road and continue to be honest about it. Maybe they just continue to say, hey, we're so tied into China here. It's tough. It's going to be tough to overcome. There was another headline that came up about a report out that Ford was going to get hit hard by tariffs. But I think that report, I got to believe that someone was getting that report ready, wanted really badly to send that report out. And in spite of the news yesterday that said that Trump was going to hold off, the administration was going to hold off for 6 months, or at least up to 6 months, on auto tariffs, then for a report to come out that Ford is going to get hurt by tariffs, it's like someone wrote the report and felt like, woe is me, all my work is for naught. I still need to publish this report. And so they still put it out. Kind of a waste of time, because one thing flies in the face of the other. And I tend to believe that if the tariffs are going to be held off on automakers for a little while, that Ford's not going to be hurt by tariffs. And I think most of the market is not believing that report on its face, because Ford is up just a little bit. They're up about 0.5% in the early trading. Dow trading at 112 now, got as high as 121, 122, just kind of hanging in there. On the political front, we've got the 2,700th candidate jumping into the Democratic primary race for president. I'm kidding. I think it's officially number 23. Bill de Blasio for the mayor of New York City. Widely believed, not just by Republicans, not just by conservatives, but widely believed by most New Yorkers to possibly be the worst mayor they've had, certainly in their lifetime, maybe in the history of that great city. Crime is up, homelessness is up, the streets look horrible, the subways are broken. And you got a guy that's mayor. Look, I don't live in New York. I don't have ties to New York. I don't have close friends or family that live in New York. I'm sure if I trace my roots back and went off in 100 different directions on tree branches of my family tree, I'm certain that I would come across family members that live in New York or have some ties to New York. But nobody close to me lives there. I've got a daughter and a son-in-law that are a couple hours north of there. So I don't really have ties to New York. I visited the city of New York. I like New York. From a tourist perspective, I like New York. I think Manhattan is a cool place to spend time. I think there's a lot of things to see there. There's a lot of things to experience. If you like to experience a diversity of different kinds of foods, see a lot of different things, it can really be a cool place. But it is filthy. It's, the streets are dirty. The roads are in horrible need of repair. The homelessness is really out of control, getting to that level of San Francisco and Los Angeles. And I'm sorry, one thing that every city in this country that has high crime rates, high homeless rates, and are generally speaking dirty, just physically dirty cities, they all have two things in common. They all have large numbers of people, obviously big populations, and they all have city governments that have mostly been run by Democrats for a long time. That's just, you can't escape the facts. And if you try to pretend that one doesn't have anything to do with the other, you're absolutely insane. You're absolutely ignoring simple common sense, and you're ignoring facts. And it's this perpetual thing that is going to be so difficult to ever break the cycle. When you get into big cities like New York, Chicago, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Atlanta, a couple of places like Dallas may be one of the few exceptions. Phoenix might be a little bit of an exception. You've got a few exceptions out there. But you get into most of these big cities, and in the inner city, you've got a disproportionate number of minorities that live in the big cities. And when I say disproportionate, I mean disproportionate to the more rural places. I think currently the African American population in the United States, I might be off a little bit on this, the African American population in the US, I think, is in the neighborhood of 13 or 14%. Maybe it's as high as 15% now. I think Latinos make up something in the neighborhood of 20 to 22%. And then you have a few other ethnic minorities that all combine together, like you put them all together. Maybe there's another 15 or 20%, and then the rest of the United States is white. That's what most people in the United States are Anglo-Saxon white. So those are nationwide, the statistics and the numbers. But you go into the inner city, and you may have as many as 35-40% African American. You may have as much as 35-40% Hispanic, and it comes closer proportionately to white people. And traditionally, minorities tend to vote more Democrat. Not all. I'm not painting a broad brush and putting everyone in the same category, but traditionally minorities vote more Democrat. So you have higher concentrations of minorities in the city who are going to keep putting Democrats in office, and you have Democrats in office who are going to keep pandering to the minorities. They're going to keep on running this false narrative of we're the only party, we're the only people politically that are going to help you out, and instead of helping them up, instead of giving them a hand up, they want to continue to give handouts, and it's just this thing perpetuates. And so Democrats continue to run these cities into the ground with their irresponsible fiscal policies. They run these things into the ground with their irresponsible environmental policies, their irresponsible business regulations. They're not doing anything to help these cities out, but they claim they are, and people keep voting for them. In a way, you feel like these cities are kind of getting what they deserve, but at the same time, you feel kind of bad for the people there and wish that things could get fixed. New York, look, there's probably 5 people in New York's got 17 million people that live there. I bet there's 5 people or less that listen to my presentation that are in New York, because they probably disagree with me so heavily politically. But for those 5 of you that listen, get a couple of your friends to listen, have them get a couple of their friends tune in, get a handful of New Yorkers to listen, and listen very closely to this, people that live in New York. Pull your heads out of your butts and stop voting for Democrats. They are not helping you. They are not doing anything to help your city. They want your vote. They want to maintain power. They want socialist policies to maintain control over your lives. And they're not doing anything to help your city. Put in a city council that's Republican. Put in a mayor that's Republican. Watch how things will change in a very short period of time. You don't have these kind of problems in bigger cities around the country that have more conservatives running the cities. You just don't. It's sad to me. It's kind of pathetic is what it is. But anyways, good old Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York, that is arguably the worst mayor of New York in the history of that city, maybe one of the worst mayors in the United States, in the history of the United States, in any city, has now said that he's going to run for mayor. He is a millionaire. He is maybe not like a multi-millionaire. He's kind of like a Bernie Sanders millionaire. He's probably got a net worth of a couple million, and he's probably made $1 million or more a year for a few years. But Mr. Well-to-do, Mr. Elite Snob Wealthy person, had the audacity in his launch video to say that, America has plenty of money. It's just in the hands of the wrong people. Yeah, starting with him, starting with that socialist moron, the money is in the hands of the wrong people. It's in the hands of the government. That's the problem. There is a lot of wealth in this country, and the more of it you put in the hands of the government, the worse off this country is going to be. And Bill de Blasio is a shining example of that. He is a rock star amongst idiot politicians with liberal socialist ideas that is ruining the things that he's in charge of and that he's been elected to take care of. So welcome to the race, de Blasio. I mean, every time they add another person into this race, they just water it down more. Although I'll tell you the one thing that might be clever for the Democrats, the more people that get into this race, I think the better chance they're giving Joe Biden to emerge as the winner on the Democrat side. I'm not a fan of Joe Biden. I think Joe Biden is an idiot. I think Joe Biden has literally been on the wrong side of almost every single political decision he's ever voted on. Go back and look at his voting record in the Senate. Go back and look at the things he stood for as part of the Obama administration. Politically speaking, the guy is inept. He's a survivor. He knew how to stay around in politics for a long time. But in terms of his decisions, in terms of his policy, in terms of the things he voted on, he's been on the wrong side of history on dang near everything he's ever done. He's an absolute moron. And yet, that moron may be the safest bet on the Democrat side. That moron might do a little bit less damage than some of these wacko far left nut job liberals that are mostly running to try and get that nomination on the Democrat side. I think if it were just Biden and Sanders and no one else was in there running for that, in a situation like that, I think Sanders would have a chance. I think Sanders competing with too many other nut job far left people, and it's going to have a hard time getting the nomination. But anyways, welcome to the race, de Blasio. Good to have you on board. One more nut job in a basket full of nuts already. Going to be fun, going to be interesting. That's all I have, folks. Right now, the Dow is up 163 points. Strong start to the day. We'll see if it continues. Hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.